Good morning. My name is Kate Jules, and I'm the Chief Compliance Officer and Chief Operations Officer here at Foster Group. I'm joined today by my colleague, Tim Mabey, our Director of IT. We'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Financial Security Starts with Cybersecurity, Protecting Yourself in a Digital World. Before we get started with today's presentation, there are a few housekeeping items we want to touch on. First, today's webinar is scheduled to last about 30 minutes. This is being recorded, and a link to view the recording will be sent via our e-news. On the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button. Feel free to submit your questions anytime during the webinar using this button. We'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. Tim, you and I spend a lot of time talking about cybersecurity, don't we?
We do, yeah.
So let's talk about some of the things that you and I get to talk about.
Sure, we can talk about network layers like sandboxes and firewalls. We can talk about intrusion detection and prevention systems. We can talk about antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint detection and response, extended detection and response, encryption at rest, encryption in transit. We talk about privilege management, zero trust network access. Want me to keep going?
No, I think that's enough for our attendees today. Today is a little bit different because we're going to be talking about individual cybersecurity.
That's right. And individual cybersecurity is super important for all of our clients, for all of our friends and family. This is just something that everybody needs to take into account.
We're not going to be doom and gloom, but we do want to be educational, and we want you to understand risk and have some action items at the end of today's webinar. As time passes, the digital world continues to become more and more integrated into our lives. Whether it's viewing our doorbell cameras, managing our finances, connecting with our friends, even accessing healthcare services, the digital universe is a crucial tool for us. However, this increased reliance also comes with greater exposure to cyber threats.
Yeah, that's right. We hear about breaches all the time. Earlier last year, there was a lawsuit filed that brought to light a massive data breach that allegedly occurred in April of 2024. National Public Data, a background check company, experienced a data breach that affected 3 billion records and individuals. Their personally identifiable information was breached. This included things like social security numbers, home addresses, date of birth, email addresses, phone numbers. And if we look back in recent history, that's not uncommon. We've seen this happen time and time again. Companies like Yahoo, Home Depot, Marriott, Equifax, Target, Facebook, Adobe, LinkedIn, Uber, like the list goes on. This
goes
just
on
happens.
and on.
It's inevitable.
Yeah. It's discouraging to know that in spite of our best efforts to manage our own digital footprint, we might not be able to outrun the risks that inherently exist in our digital world. And I think of some elements of cybersecurity a little bit like trying to give a large dog a bath in a small sink. It's not fun, but you just got to get it done.
That's a good analogy.
We encourage all of our clients to regularly assess their cyber hygiene. At Foster Group, we take this responsibility really seriously with robust systems in place to monitor our infrastructure and strict policies to protect your information. Even the best cybersecurity programs can fall victim to incidents, which is why layering your protection is crucial. And we're going to talk some about that today. Adding multiple layers ensures that if one company experiences a breach, it won't cascade into widespread issues across your entire digital footprint and identity. Breaches are unfortunately a fact of life, and scammers are constantly evolving their tactics, particularly when it comes to financial and investment accounts. While some of the advice that we share today may not be new, we hope to reinforce some basic rules that will help you keep your financial information secure and minimize the risk of a cyber incident impacting your financial life. So, Tim, let's get started.
Yeah, let's talk about rule number 1. Stop reusing passwords. So there's a layer of password strength and complexity, but password reuse is by far the most common issue of why breaches result in further issues for people.
So, Tim, walk us through how password reusing becomes an issue if someone falls victim to a scam or a fraudster gets that information.
Yeah, so the term is credential stuffing. So in the event of a data breach, any one of those ones that we talked earlier, if you had an email address with that same password and you use that for your social media account, your bank account, credit card, anything else online, these fraudsters are using scripted tools. They're automated. They're not sitting there trying to plug this in. But as soon as that information is available, it's being tried against all these other accounts. And if a breach happens at one company and you reuse that password, you're just exposing yourself to many more issues at other services.
So In addition to having unique passwords, we talk a lot about password length and strength. So walk me through a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, so we're going to throw an image up on the screen here, and this is just a chart from Hive Systems, and they do this every year based on readily available hardware that's off the shelf, and what it takes to brute force a password. And by brute force, we're just saying a computer is there trying every iteration of character and password until it unlocks it.
So Tim, when I look at this slide, one of the things that jumps out to me right away is that numbers only column with the purple boxes. And I think that there may be some people watching this webinar that might be using their debit card PIN, that 4-digit number, as a password. And this would show us that that can instantly be accessed through that kind of brute force or automated attempt on it. But if you just look on the other side of this chart, just the difference of adding in upper and lowercase letters and then some symbols, it makes a tremendous impact.
That's right. And length is one of the most important things. As you go down that list of number of characters on the left, the longer your password is, it just becomes that much more hard to crack for these computer systems.
I think password complexity is something that's really interesting. And as we think about what does it mean to use strong and unique passwords too, something that isn't easily guessable is also really important. So I think about the common one of people maybe referencing their alma mater in the year that they graduated. So Go Hawkeyes 74 exclamation point wouldn't be a password that we'd recommend because given the information that's probably available about you online, it's something that's pretty easily guessable.
Yeah, and if you look at that password, you might feel comfortable with it being 3 years to crack it. But when you're using readily available information and information that's out on your social media accounts, it just becomes that much easier for someone to get access to your accounts.
Yes. And so we've seen issues come up with this when there are scenarios in which a client maybe has reused passwords. We had an example where a client had reused the same password for email, financial institutions. I'm not sure what else, but likely other things too. And their email address had been compromised. They were unaware of this. And the person perpetrating this fraud sat in that email account for an extended period of time until they were ready to act on the financial account and then set up some mail rules in the email account. And eventually the client detected it and we were able to stop the financial fraud from occurring. But I think it goes to show that once somebody gets in one account and they get in another, you're in a kind of a sitting duck position.
Yeah, and you may not know they're there. They're in there looking for tone of communication. They're looking at who you communicate with. They're looking at invoices or DocuSigns for signatures. Mm-hmm. They're looking at all these things that they can aggregate together and then use that in a larger targeted attack.
Yes, that's true. So Tim, as we've talked about these strong, unique passwords, I imagine our webinar participants at home are thinking what I'm thinking. I don't want to keep track of all this stuff. So what's your recommendation?
Yeah, that's where Password Manager comes into play. So biggest rule number one, start using a password manager. This allows you to have unique passwords, have long and strong passwords, those two things that we just talked about, and not have to know what those passwords are.
So for all of us, tell us about some of the common names in the password manager world.
Yeah, I'd probably stick to the top four. We're not going to recommend one of these, but 1Password, Dashlane, Bitwarden, Keeper Security. These are all good industry standard password managers.
Okay, so just give us high level. How does a password manager work?
Yep. So you're gonna create your account. You're gonna set a long and strong master password. That should be something that's unique to this password manager and not used anywhere else. The longer, the better.
It can
think
even
of a
be
sentence or a phrase.
Yeah.
Use that. Write it down. I would never recommend writing passwords down, but this is the one time I would. Store that on an emergency sheet that you can keep in a safety deposit box, somewhere secure in your home. You could make it tamper resistant with the security envelope. You can tape it, whatever. If you forget it, you have it there. This is your one point of access to your vault and passwords that we're going to be talking about and going forward, and how to keep those passwords unique and secure.
We're going to be sending out a resource guide as part of access to this webinar that's going to walk you through some of the steps on getting started with the password manager. So we'll talk a little bit about this high level, but know that there's more information coming to you after the webinar. So Tim, we've got our password manager. We've set up this master password that's long, a sentence, it's hard to guess. It's got some complexity to it. Now what?
So you're going to start getting your passwords into your password manager. And then as you use your accounts, and maybe take a Saturday afternoon, go through, start resetting your most important accounts. I would just say that's the first step. And as you get used to using the password manager, it's going to become easier to do.
So important accounts are going to be what? Email?
Email first and foremost. Let's get email locked down and secure. That is the hub for your financial information accounts, your social media, your communications, signature, DocuSign signatures, things like that you might have come from businesses that you work with.
So if we do email that Saturday afternoon, what's the next things that we're going to do?
I would focus on financial accounts, social media accounts, other important websites that you might have stored payment information in.
Well, that sounds about as much fun as giving a stinky dog a bath, but I think it is something that if you and I were going to say, if there's a great way for you to spend a Saturday afternoon, it's that.
Yeah, and I would say just taking the time now may seem like a lot, but it's going to prevent so much time in the future in the event of a breach. Okay,
so Tim, tell me how you feel about password storage in browsers.
Stop doing that. Password manager is going to take care of that. And then once you've migrated to a password manager, get rid of anything that's been stored in the browser.
Okay. Tim, how do you feel about password managers in native applications on a mobile device?
Better than nothing. I would still personally recommend using one of the industry standard password managers.
Okay. Tim, how do you feel about storing passwords on a note on your iPhone that you share with your loved ones?
Immediately stop that.
Okay. Tim, how do you feel about writing passwords on a sheet of paper and keeping it under your mouse pad at your desk at home?
Use a password manager.
Okay, that's great. So rule number 1, strong and unique passwords, and we're going to accomplish this through a password manager.
That's right.
Okay, so let's think about rule number 2.
Rule number 2 is your second layer of security. Second layer of security is multi-factor or two-factor authentication. This is just something in addition to your password to log into an account. Your password is something you know. Your multi-factor is something you have, a phone, a code, an email.
So most commonly with multi-factor, it's the experience of logging into a website and saying, we've sent a code to your phone. Can you enter that 6-digit code right now?
That's right. And it may seem like an inconvenience to go and add this. Many of us are forced now. Companies are starting and have been starting to require this across the board, especially financial institutions.
For good reason.
But the more places that you can enable that, the more secure you're going to be and the less you're going to deal with a data breach, like we talked about earlier, impacting all these other accounts that you have.
Yeah. We had an example where a client was being targeted by fraudsters. They had unfortunately breached a financial account. And in that situation, our client got the multi-factor code and just had that moment of thought to say, I'm not doing anything where I should have been receiving it. And that was really how they were able to detect that fraud had happened relatively early before this fraudster had actually gotten access to their financial account. We see that type of thing come up in other places as well, Tim. So when we think about multi-factor, it wears a variety of costumes. One of the most common things that comes up is with people buying things off places like Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah, one of the most common scams that we've seen going around with that in Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace is somebody gets a hold of your advertisement that has your phone number on it. So they've already got your phone number. They are going to set up a Google Voice account, which is a digital number that gets tied to your phone number. Since they have your phone number, they're sending an authorization code to your cell phone number, asking you to verify your identity by sending them that code. And as soon as you send that code, they've now gained access to this additional number tied to your information.
It shows up in a variety of places, but I think multi-factor, in addition to being an important layer for us, also can just give us a little bit of time or prompt to stop and think. Okay, so if we had 2 rules that we're going to ask everybody to take away, it would be these first 2 things, right? Use a password manager and change to strong and unique passwords, and then use multi-factor wherever possible.
Your best password is going to be the password that you don't know. It's going to be the one that's stored in your password manager.
It can be a little annoying if there's something that comes up where you're saying, hey, I've got a string of 15 characters and numbers, none of which make sense. But what it can really mitigate for people is pretty substantial.
That's right. And I just add a note in here that with each one of these password managers, they're going to come with generators, and the generators are going to be what gives you this randomized long and strong password. You can set whether or not there should be a special character or a number included. But in addition to that, they can use passphrases. So if there are passwords where you have to enter them and it's not going to work to use a password manager, you can use passphrases, which is just a generic set of words that are tied together with hyphens.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think that we know what a lot of people are going to be doing after watching this webinar, and that's nothing but a good thing from our opinion. I told you we weren't going to be doom and gloom, but we are going to talk just a little bit about scams and what we see happening commonly across, our client base, but also in our own households. So I think the most important thing for people to take away is that the sophistication of fraud and the days of it being easily identifiable are kind of gone. So when we think back, even 10 years ago, the prints that needed money in their account, the emails that clearly were not drafted by somebody who had strong communication skills, that's really changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, and AI has just taken that to another level. You think about Apple releasing their Apple Intelligence. You have ChatGPT, you have X with the Grok, and Microsoft with Copilot. These tools are being advertised to help business users reformulate their emails for better sounding tone and just generate emails from scratch. Fraudsters are using this, not natively speaking English, to go and create these really legitimate looking emails.
Tim, a couple of scams that I want to talk about just because they're so common that we hear from clients is when they get a call from purportedly from either the IRS or Microsoft.
Yeah, tech support scams. We see emails coming across saying there's an issue with your computer. We need to connect with you and resolve it, or X is going to happen. And so what happens is they get you on the phone. They say you need to download some software, and then that gives them remote access to your computer. And now they're planting additional backdoor access so that they can continue to access your computer while you're not there, get into your financial accounts, get into your email address.
Yeah, it's not fun to think about, but I think it's important to inform this idea of just being a little bit aware and a little bit wary at all times. So we had a client, again, where a fraudster was trying to get them to take action. They had purported to be from the Securities Exchange Commission and told our client via a phone call that they were investigating the client's bank. They knew what bank they did business with. They had an idea of some of the financial account types they had at the bank. They even went so far as to send our client digital images via text of their federal ID, or what was purportedly their federal ID. They walked the client through the investigation they were doing in the bank and suggested that they establish a new financial account and move their funds before the investigation wrapped up. In that moment, our client had that moment of stopping and thinking and reached out to us, and we were able to say, stop, not real. This is not a real thing. And so I think that if there's one thing I would really encourage people is if you have that moment of just stopping and thinking, does this feel right? Is it real? Stop acting.
Yeah, take a pause, contact a person at a known number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the best thing you can do is call someone you know. We would always want you to call us if you had a question for us about any of your investment accounts or financial accounts. I think that this idea of, particularly if there's an appeal that has a sense of urgency or a sense of, an emotional pull at it. Another common scam that's coming up is using AI for a grandchild who's in jail or who needs healthcare and they need money for it. So any of those things, stop and take a moment and think. Call someone that you know and trust, and just make sure you're thinking, this could be fraud.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tim, 3 good things for us to start out thinking about today. Rule number 1, use strong and unique passwords with a password manager. Number 2 is multi-factor. And number 3 is just being aware.
Yeah.
So there's a few other proactive steps that I'd like you all to consider, and we're going to run through those quickly before we wrap up our webinar today. So number 1, updating operating systems. Tim, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this is any device that you have, phones, laptops, computers, and don't limit it to that. Let's think about things that are smart devices in your house as well. Keep those up to date. Companies are coming out with security fixes all the time, and it just helps prevent the one thing that might allow a fraudster to get access to your home network.
Use automatic app updates if you can. A lot of our devices have that ability. Well, they'll just auto install them in the background or overnight. And we think that's something that's really helpful and convenient, but don't ignore them.
Yeah.
Right? There
That's
can
right.
frequently be some critical patches in there.
Yep.
I think number 2, look at your online footprint. How much personal information is about you on the internet?
Yeah, this is huge. I would say the stuff that's on social media about, who am I or what do I like? What are these things that you're posting out there? All of that can be used to target an attack against you, and it can be used to help guess what somebody might have set as a password.
Yeah, I think about things. If somebody on social media is a consistent sharer and then donator to GoFundMe's, that's all usually publicly visible, unless you tell it not to be. That would create a vulnerability for them where somebody who was a scammer might try and take advantage of them.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I'd probably keep in mind is many companies are using security questions for password resets, and they're asking for a city that you were married in, or a school mascot, or these things that can be used at one company to reset your password. If you're reusing those questions at another company, it's just as easy to go and get access to that account. So I would stay away from using legitimate information there. Make things up, store them in your password manager.
Okay, great. And last thing, let's talk just quickly about public Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah, this is a huge one. It's so cheap and easy to get a device that creates a wireless access point. Let's say you went to Starbucks and it says free Starbucks Wi-Fi and you connect to it, but it's not actually Starbucks. That illegitimate access point could be then redirecting your communications. It could be openly tracking where you're going and the accounts that you're using. And just public Wi-Fi in general, I would avoid using. And if you have to use it, I would use a VPN.
Okay, great. We said we weren't going to be doom and gloom. That one makes me feel a little doom and gloom. But again, we're trying to help you understand the mindset that you can take to help protect your financial security in an ever-changing environment. So one of the things that I think is simple with that public Wi-Fi one is you can usually toggle off auto join available networks, and that can really help you out.
Yeah, and many of our phones have hotspots on them, so that would be another recommendation is use the hotspot functionality in your phone to connect you for Wi-Fi.
Well, great. So to recap, our 3 rules from today. Tim, hit us one more time with them.
Stop reusing passwords. Use strong passwords. And to do that, use a password manager. They will generate the strong passwords for you. Enable multi-factor wherever you can. It's going to be a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's nothing compared to getting attacked and having an actual data breach with your accounts.
I think the last thing, just always be alert for the scams that are out there. Don't hesitate to call us or other trusted people in your life where you know someone that you're talking to and get their guidance and input on kind of whatever might be happening. Well, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for attending our webinar. As a reminder, we will be following up with anybody who put a question in the Q&A box after the webinar. We'll also be sending out the information that we covered together along with a resource guide via Foster Group's e-newsletter. If you have any comments or questions, you can email us at the address on screen, or if you'd like to request a meeting with one of our advisors, you can also visit us at fostergrp.com/request meeting.